Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. First timer over here on this Tuesday afternoon. He's over there, sports director of WBIR Channel 10 in my neck of the woods here. We've crossed paths in high school football ranks and everything, but we have not actually done a podcast to this point. So that's changing today here on this Tuesday edition of the program. It's Karthik Venkataraman. Karthik, good evening, sir. How are you?
Doing well. How are you, man?
Doing pretty well. So we talked about before we got on here that there's a lot of content, a lot of stuff for Tennessee. I mean, it's pretty good, right? Like being in the weeds here, we both do two different things, but I mean, how much more fun is it covering Tennessee and Tennessee athletics year round for BIR, knowing that like you go from one sport, oh, this is gonna be awesome, and fans and like people who are watching the program, everything every night, it's like they're happy. Like you're not really getting a lot of angry messages or like, oh, why are you being so hard? It's really hard to be hard on anybody with Tennessee athletics right now.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to be critical of a lot of teams that are doing a lot of winning. I think it's crazy, man. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was basically like, football season to pretty much the end of baseball season, which now seems like it's a June, or softball for that matter, if you include last year. You're going into June. I mean, it's an August, June sort of thing just with Tennessee athletics. So, things are crazy with just how much success like each team's having. I mean, the Vols in a New Year's Six game not too long ago, played a New Year's Bowl last year for football. And then you have the basketball team, making it to Elite Eight last year for the first time in quite some time. Women's basketball, had been making some Sweet 16s. Obviously, you have the coaching change up, a lot of excitement there with the new head coach. And, baseball and softball are killing it too with the SEC championships and deep runs in the postseason. So very exciting time if you're a Vol or a Lady Vol fan, that's for sure.
And I mean, it's only getting more exciting. Like it's going to be, I am very interested to see what, how people balance their, and look, you and I are going to have to deal with this come basketball season, where just the first year of Kim Caldwell, and also we're going to talk about basketball here in a second, but like the back and forth, it's going to be kind of like baseball season, because it's like you have a game every night. Like you're going to have something, and you're going to have a lot of eyeballs on both just every single night. People are, I mean, I don't know what you saw, but like I just feel like the attention on Kim Caldwell and her style and everything else, I think it's going to bring a lot of eyeballs and be just kind of a fun system, similar to what Heupel's running, similar to what Tony Vitello is bringing. I think it's going to be high octane and must-see television here in Knoxville.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people have a lot of reason to be excited for her. Obviously, I think the big critique on her is, can she get it done at like a major level of Division I? So that's an answer that we'll soon find out here. But yeah, I mean, between, all the teams, and then you got, I ain't even mentioned, but like women's tennis and men's tennis play well. Then rowing finishes with their highest finish in program history. So yeah, I mean, like, it's just like everywhere you turn, like Tennessee athletics is doing great. And, I know that's what Danny White, the athletic director, wants. And wherever you go, excitement. It's excitement everywhere. So
absolutely. Everything School HQ. Yeah. We're going to play a game. So starting every Tuesday here on this edition of the program, we're going to be doing Hot or Not. And it's one of those, like, there's all the hot take stuff out there. We're in a hot take culture, Karthik. But here, it's more of I want to pick your brain as an expert on this very thing, and things that I've been thinking about over the last week that I've scribbled down and I've just wondered about. And I'm like, it's kind of like for me, maybe it's like therapy, like Tennessee sports therapy, where I'm like, am I off base with this thesis? Am I like, how outlandish is it that I'm jotting this down and really thinking about this? But these are things that I think are fair to consider, and things that I think are fun to talk about, especially when it comes to Tennessee baseball. So first up here, Karthik, hot or not? Hot or not? Tennessee baseball is actually better than the 2022 team.
I'm going to say hot in the sense that I think they're peaking at the right time, where I felt like the 2022 team maybe wasn't at their peak as really the NCAA tournament went. They kind of struggled a little bit in their regional with a couple of games there. And then, everyone saw what happened in the super regional against Notre Dame. But also at the same time, when we talk about that 2022 baseball team, we remember that people were discussing legitimately, is this the greatest college baseball team to ever step foot on a field? Like that was something that was being talked then. It's not being talked now. I think if you look at the hitting numbers and statistically, if you look at the numbers, they're so similar, like batting average, almost identical. OPS, slugging percentage, almost identical. Runs brought in, runs per game, it's close. And the thing that is probably not identical between the two teams is that 2022 team was just so much better at pitching. Tennessee ranks, one of the top in earned run average in the country. But at the same time, they allow about, I think it's over a run more than that 2022 team did. There are so many great pitchers on that 2022 team. And I think that's the big thing with this 24 team. When I talk to people about it, I'm just like, okay, the thing that I think that could stop them from winning it all is their pitching. Like, that's not a knock on anybody. I just think that they got their one guy who's been solidified for a little while, Drew Beam, and then they have to kind of plug and play. I mean, we even saw it in the regional, like Chris Thomas. He's had some great moments this year, and he goes a couple of innings, and then you get a guy like AJ Kazi in, but he was only able to deliver one out the other night, and then you got to go to AJ Kazi earlier, who was absolutely phenomenal in that game. But I guess the thing is, like, what are you going to get out of your pitching on a night-to-night basis is the consistency that I think for Tennessee baseball is a big question. That was it never seemed like a question for Tennessee baseball in 2022. That being said, it's all about peaking at the right time, and this team's peaking really well right now. Last year's team, for example, nowhere near as good as the 2022 team statistically. They make it to the College World Series. They win a College World Series game for the first time in a long time in program history. And, it's about peaking at the right time. And, I think this team's bats are, really getting going, from top lineup. Like, we've seen guys like Christian Moore and Billy Amick and Blake Burke having it pretty much going all season long. Blake Burke with that incredible hitting streak, Christian Moore with all the home runs, and everyone loves it when Billy comes up to the plate because you saw what he did and what he's been doing in the recent games. And then now you got guys really coming in the lineup, like Dylan Dryling's been playing really well all year. Kavaris Tears have been playing really well all year. I really liked what Cal Stark's been doing, whether it's drawing a walk, getting hit by a pitch, or you see him turn over the lineup with some home runs or something, this past weekend. And all of a sudden Tennessee baseball team's looking really complete on the offensive end. Obviously, anyone who's seen them this year, that is their strength, is how well they're able to put runs up on the board. And, they've broke their own home run record now. So that was set back in 2022. So, they're peaking at the right time. And for those reasons, I say, they're probably better off to win a national title, I think, right now than they were in 2022 at this time of year.
I think that's fair. But I guess part of what I was wondering too, when you think about it, and it's hard to now that it's been 2 years removed, where part of what I think the lore with that 2022 team was, you've never seen anything like that. Tennessee fans had never, this was all fresh. This was new. The home runs, it felt like Jordan Beck hit a lot more home runs than he actually did. You go back through his numbers, and it's like, I think if you asked any Tennessee fan from right now, any Tennessee baseball fan who led Tennessee in home runs in 2022, I don't think the majority would say Trey Lipscomb. But Trey Lipscomb led that team with home runs and with 2022, or with 22 in 2022. And I think you look at Drew Gilbert and you're like, power guy, all these big home run moments. He had like 13 in 2022. Yep. So you look at it and I'm like, I actually think this lineup's more powerful. Obviously, Christian Moore at the top, Blake Burke, Billy Amick, we know what their raw power is. Dreiling is just quietly raking. He moves up to the 4 spot. They don't miss a beat there. Kavaris Tears slides
home
down.
Runs on the season, I'm pretty sure. He's going off.
That's what I'm saying. Dylan Dreiling, I mean, we're going to talk about Dylan Dreiling in a second, but I look up and down this lineup, I think it's also deeper. Tennessee has options where Seth Stevenson was great in the leadoff spot in 2022. Obviously Cortland Lawson at that 9 spot, he was unbelievable. The production you got from him there, also super underrated, but they didn't have guys behind them. If they got any bad injury luck in 2022, I think they would have had some real problems, but they didn't. And I think that's kind of what I look at with 2024 is that you can try Reese Chapman. Cannon Peebles was one of your prize transfer additions this offseason. He doesn't play. You talked about with Cal Stark, he's been so good that Cannon Peebles is just, it's next year for him. It's not going to happen this year. Robin Villeneuve, he fills it up in before you get into SEC play. He can't, it just doesn't work in SEC play, so he's on ice until next year. But he might get into the fold. Colby Backus, you kind of look at all the different options that Tennessee has in 2024. I just think they're more versatile than that 2022 team. And I also think fans might take this team for granted because of how it's crazy today. it's kind of expected. Like, I think Tennessee fans went into this year with this lineup and everything else. They're like, well, yeah, this is what they should be doing. Like, them just hitting a bunch of home runs and them dominating the way they have, it just feels like that's a testament to what Tony Vitello has built, is that this all feels, seen it before. I saw it in 2022. Let's see where we go in College World Series, this, that, and the other. But I do think that's something that really, really helped that 2022 team in the lore there, is that we've never seen anything like it. And then, of course, the personalities. I think it was just more of a outspoken group, more just kind of in your face extroverts, and Drew Gilbert and Jordan Beck. These guys just aren't like that. Christian Moore is, but outside of that, I mean, you don't really have those same kind of personalities, which is fine. Everybody's different, but I think that's one of the other differences too. Is just the personality types of the two teams kind of lend itself to more like, I mean, just that kind of unbelievable lore that that 2022 team was. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think, obviously the personalities, I've had this conversation before on that 2022 team. I mean, you got Jordan Beck, maybe or maybe not, flipping off the Georgia Tech outfield as he is surrounding the bases. You got Drew Gilbert with the yelling and the bat flips, and the energy was just, with those kind of guys in 2022 was absolutely insane. As you mentioned, Christian Moore may be the one guy who still likes playing villain. We saw that a little bit in the SEC tournament when they played Mississippi State, and a little John back and forth in that game. But yeah, I definitely think the personalities and the glitz and glamour of it really happening for the first time in 2022, were those kind of numbers being put up. And, it was a showcase. I mean, when they were at their peak during that season, they were absolutely incredible, like really, really, really good baseball. And it was undeniable how good they were. This team has played really well throughout the entire year as well. But I do agree with you, like the standard now is for Tony Vitello, make it to the College World Series, or the season kind of feels like a bust. And maybe eventually it'll be, we got to win the College World Series, or the season's going to be a bust.
Which, again, it's like a testament to, hey, when you're this good and you make 4 straight super regionals, like, fans are like, all right, this is fun. It's also like the investment, because there's just so many games and you spend so many weekends with Tennessee baseball now, that I think fans are just, for me too, like, from like, you spend so much more time with Tennessee baseball than you do any of the other big 3. Like, you're just there all the time. You're watching all the time. Like, it's just, I don't know. There's so much buildup. It's why I think baseball, if you're a Braves fan or whoever, like, when you finally break through, it's just like, okay, I feel validated. All the time I spent following this team all year long, it just feels sweeter. I think those kind of runs, because there's just more games and there's more blood, sweat, and tears put into it as fans, because it's a long season. It's a grind. And this team is right there in the thick of things. So next one up here, we got hot or not. Hunter Ensley has actually been the most underrated Vol baseball player this season. What say you, sir?
This one was tough for me. I thought about this one a little bit, and I do think he's underrated. Like, he's good. He's been so clutch ever since, like, he's really kind of gotten his major role at UT. Like, I think obviously that Clemson game last year in the regional, 14 innings, and he's the guy that came up with the big hit. But even if you think this year, like the Florida game where he had like 7 RBIs, like absolutely went bonkers in that game. Like, there's a reason why this guy has a nickname now of Big Game Hunter. Like, he's good. And I was talking to Sean Barrows, the sports information director at Tennessee for Tennessee baseball recently. And we were discussing, I was trying to figure out what feature stories I wanted to line up for BIR before the postseason. And we were kind of discussing different players and their stories and stuff like that. And we both kind of were just talking about like Hunter Ensley. And it's just like, he's been good all season long, but it really feels like nobody's really been talking about how good he's been, because, he's got 9 homers on the season. So like, I think a lot of attention goes to those guys that are smacking him out of the park, because, that's where a lot of the attention goes, especially with this Tennessee baseball team of glitz and glamour. But then, if you're really watching and you see guys like Hunter, I mean, he's batting like 285. That's a good batting average. And, he's getting on base, and he's come up big for the Vols in many of moments this season, most notably that Florida game on the road, where they fell behind and they had to come back. And he was the benefactor as to why they did. And he's a beast, man. There's some guys that I think there's a lot of guys on this team that are not talked about as much. I think I mentioned Cal Stark earlier, but I did, Cal Stark has been great. And I don't know if he's underrated, but he's definitely not being talked about as much as he should be. And after this past weekend, I think he showed why he should probably be being talked about more, because he's really flipping that lineup over. And, there's guys on this team that people I don't think are talking about as much as the Christian Moores, the Blake Burks, the Billy Amicks, and Kavaris Tears or Dylan Drylings that are really contributing and making big moments. I mean, you mentioned Peebles earlier. This is a guy who's stepped in and he's come up with some big moments. Dalton Margo is a guy who just kind of got plugged and played in, the DH position or third base, and he's come up with big moments. Like, it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier. I think there's a lot of guys on this team that make the team versatile. Yeah. And other dudes than just the stars on this team that are really making this team go.
I agree. And it's also like he moved up to the fifth spot, and it's one of those where I think the added pressure of Hunter taking the next step, because we know what he is defensively. He's always been great in center field, and I think he's maybe even undervalued there a little bit with just what he brings defensively for Tennessee every weekend. But it's also like he's a different kind of hitter for Tennessee. Like he's a line drive guy. He's clutch, like you mentioned, but like I just love that he brings something different in the middle of the order, because you have Billy, Blake, and Christian who are just so power heavy, and then you have Tears right behind him. So you can't really pitch around Ensley, and you have this power guy right behind him, and he's been knocked in by Tears. You had a 3-run homer over the weekend that he was on base for. Like, he gets on with walks, he gets on with it. Like, I just think Hunter is just maybe someone easily overlooked by fans and what he's done this year, because I think he's actually a much better hitter at this point than Vol fans give him credit for. And if he's back for one more year next year, his senior year, I mean, I think he's going to be a gigantic piece, and who knows what he can be 3 years of just a bunch of playing time and in this Tennessee system, because I think he's been awesome. So I don't know if he's the most underrated, but I do think he has been one of the more underrated Tennessee Vols this year.
You got to have production out of the middle of your lineup, man. And if guys like that are getting on base, it really helps, because, you can't just rely top heavy on the lineup and hope that guys contribute. I mean, Tony Vitello's been saying that all season long. They need guys to contribute. Like, every guy's going to have his game, but you got to get production out of the middle of the lineup. And when you got a guy like Hunter Ensley there, it's a good spot for the Vols to be in. So,
absolutely. Next up here, hot or not, Chaz Lanier has to be better than Dalton Knecht for the Vols to make the Final Four next season. What say you, sir?
No. That's just no for me. I mean, we're talking what Dalton did last year, man. Like, insane. Like, greatest individual basketball season that people have seen out of a Vol in quite some time. I mean, Grant Williams obviously was absolutely fantastic too, but
he wasn't even close to Dalton. Like, Dalton's going to be the highest drafted Tennessee Volunteer since Dale Ellis in 1983.
Yeah, this guy's a lottery pick. He was fantastic, putting up 40 points a game. Like, to expect that Lanier is going to be as good as Dalton Knecht, I'm not going to say it's a pipe dream. Obviously, he's very efficient on offense, but it's just so unlikely that you're going to get something like that again. He needs to be good. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of guys that need to be good for Tennessee basketball. But I think the big thing that we saw towards the end of the season, and especially in that final game against Purdue in the Elite Eight, is Dalton Knecht was spectacular. But who else was with him, right? Basketball is a team sport. I always believe that. Obviously, one player can elevate you more than ever. I mean, I'm a big LeBron James fan. Cleveland Cavaliers, always thankful for 2016. Shout out LeBron. But it's just like, one guy can elevate you, but you need guys around you to complete the puzzle, man. And it's when you got guys like Darlington Dubar coming in, and Igor Milicic, and I think, and Zakai obviously coming back is a huge piece. Jemai Meshack coming back is a huge piece. All those things are what eventually going to help the Vols make a Final Four run. It's going to have to be a cohesiveness, and where you probably want some go-to guy. Like, he's going to be your certified knockdown shot in the postseason. That's the guy you're going to. That's always a great thing to have. Teams that make deep runs typically tend to have that dude, like the guy that got the dog in him. But like, you're going to have to also have dudes that step up around him. And I think Tennessee this season, going into the season, have dudes that are going to be built around. I expect guys like Jordan Gainey take a big step that they didn't, necessarily always make last year, and, really contribute to that role. Cameron Carr, if he can stay consistent with a shot, could really be a valuable piece for the Vols. Those are guys that are really going to have to step up and go. Like, expecting Chaz to go off for like 30, 40-point games, he might once or twice. I don't expect him to do it as much as Dalton Knecht did, because what Dalton did was just insane. I mean, it just was. And the more realistic scenario, I think, for the Vols to make a Final Four is to be a complete team, which they had at some points times. But then, pivotal pieces kind of start falling off the tracks. They're always great defensively. Like, even though guys like Josiah Jordan-James or Santiago Vescovi weren't always like contributing on offense, their defense was spectacular. With all due respect to Jonas Adu, you saw him disappear sometimes, especially in that final game. And it's just like, that stuff can't happen. You have to have everyone contributing that time of year because the best team's going to win.
Yeah.
And do you want to be the best team or not? It's not going to all be on Chaz Lanier.
I think that's the best way of talking about it is like any Vol fan who's going into next year, like hoping that you've struck lightning in a bottle twice with Dalton and Chaz. Like, it's just not fair expectations to put on Chaz.
Correct.
On the flip side, you did hold out the spot. Like, there was no plan B here. Like, they're going to have 2 open roster spots. It looks like maybe 1 if Rick Barnes gets a Tobe here in the late summer as a Kai type. But you cleared the decks, and like, this is your show. Like, he's going to be the number 1 option. Darnstone DeBar and Igor Milicic, like, they're going to be important factors, but this is Chaz Lanier. Like, you just made an Elite 8. Rick Barnes is in win now mode. Like, I think it's fair to still have really, really high expectations. I mean, Bart Torvik, the analytics sites for college basketball, they still have Tennessee as the best roster in the SEC. Even with Mark Sears and company coming back for Alabama this past year, or going into this year, Tennessee's right there. I mean, I don't know if he has to be I don't think he has to be as good for them to make a Final Four, but I do think Tennessee fans, it's fair to be like, look, you have more shooting with Dubar, Igor, and company. I think Tennessee's going to be a better offensive team than they were a season ago. And I know it's weird because you had Dalton, but with where Santi was last year, Jordan struggled from 3 in his first year, moving over from USC Upstate to Tennessee. Like, he shot in the 20s, I believe, from 3-point land. I think he'll be better. Sakai, obviously a good shooter. He'll be better from 3-point range. I think Dubar from in the 4 spot over James. I think that will be an upgrade at the shooting spot, at least more consistently. Igor, obviously, we'll see with Akpara and what that looks like. And if Estrella makes the jump in year 2, if Cam Carr makes the jump in year 2 and where his spot in the rotation is, he can score. So I don't know. I think, like you said, I think the collective unit could be better than what we saw last year. I just don't think Chaz Lanier is going to reach Dalton Knecht top 8 in the lottery potential.
It's got to be, I mean, pretty much what you're expecting is that he's going to have to be the SEC player of the year.
Which is doable.
It's possible, but I don't
fair expectation
to the elite level of which Dalton Knecht was. It's just not likely. Like, how many times do you see a guy that can come drop 35, 40 in a game as consistently as Dalton Knecht did? Like, literally any game you're thinking this guy could go off, and he could do it and like get most of his points in a half. And that was the kind of the case. But no, as you said, putting that expectation on one guy to be that guy is tough. Because I don't know. I don't know the conversations between Rick Barnes and Dalton Knecht, and if he was just like, I need you to be this guy. But like, likeliness of that happening, probably not.
Final one here tonight, sir. This is, I think, the football fans who, look, we got a little bit. We still got 2 months before we're
under 100 days away, though.
We're getting closer. We're getting closer. Hot or not, final one here tonight, sir. One of Tennessee's wide receivers will have a superstar season this fall. Hot or not?
I will say there is potential for it to happen. I ultimately do not think it will happen. I think that if there is a guy proven by position in Josh Heupel's system to really pop off with an accurate quarterback, as we saw with Hendon Hooker, to a guy like Jalen Hyatt, we're looking at the slot position. A guy like Squirrel White could potentially really pop off and play really well. Brew McCoy, there's going to be questions. Nico didn't really get to work that much with Brew because of his injury that he sustained in South Carolina. And obviously, it's an injury that you're going to have to come back from, and it's a tough injury to come back from. Obviously, it looks like Brew's making great success based off of what he's posted off his Instagram, and that's fantastic. We love to see it for him. But is that chemistry going to be there? What kind of limitations is Brew going to have in the fall? Obviously, he didn't really do major participation in the spring, so that's a question. How good is Dante Thornton going to be this year? Question. Chris Brazzell could be a guy. I mean, he was really good last year, and that could be something that, really works out and goes forward. But if I had to guess, I mean, like, Squirrel, he got a decent amount of targets in that Citrus Bowl game in which Nico actually did start. I think he had 3 receptions for 38 or 39 yards or something like that. But I think, there's potential for that duo to work out pretty well. Nico's obviously an accurate passer, but this is going to be pretty much his freshman year. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the first time he's really going to see playing time. Playing Iowa in a Citrus Bowl is great, but the attendance wasn't. And, it's not like a super hostile environment or stuff. So, like, Nico's also going to have to go through his own path of figuring stuff out. And, obviously that affects wide receiver production because that's the guy throwing you the ball. So there are going to be some question marks. Tennessee, I imagine, is going to be a pretty good team that gets 9 wins, probably 8 or 9 wins, depending on how the season goes. And then you kind of figure it out from there. Are you going to get superstar production from a guy? I think there's questions that are going to kind of have to be answered. But if I had to pick a guy that I think that could probably do it based off of what I've seen out of Josh Heupel's system and what could potentially happen, I'm going to go with Squirrel White.
I like Squirrel. I don't think it's Squirrel. And I do think somebody breaks out. I think we're all scared to, because you saw last year in Ramel, like that one will be a mystery to me forever. What happened to Ramel Keaton last year? Brew obviously going down didn't help, but you talk about the slot, and that is just a bread and butter position. Squirrel led obviously Tennessee in catches last year. I think he'll lead them again this year. I think it's Dante. I'm a big believer in the year 2 jump now, and Heupel's scheme and getting more comfortable. I think he was coming on the outside. I mean, he had that big touchdown catch against Mizzou. I think his size, his speed on the outside, Nico is going to hit him on some big vertical plays this year. And I think it's going to be like that Jalen Waddle type bump for him. I think he's going to have, there's a reason Nico's in the top 5 in Heisman, preseason Heisman odds. And if Nico is who we think he can be, and I understand it's still year 2, like you said, he's still basically a freshman coming in here. I think if Nico has that kind of success, anywhere close to it, one of these receivers is going to have a huge year. Like, the offense just allows for one of these receivers. So I think fans are like nervous to like pinpoint who it is. But for me, someone's going to do it. We're going to look at the numbers and be like, wait, he has how many yards and how many touchdowns? How much is he averaging per reception here? And to me, I think it's Dante. Like, I think Thornton has just been kind of forgotten about, but I think he just, to me, screams the most Heupel receiver type guy to just give defenses fits in year 2 in this game. I think he's a lot more comfortable. I think he's a lot more confident going into year 2. I can't buy enough Dante Thornton stock. But I also think Squirrel White's just going to be as consistent as he was 2 years ago or the last year, and he's going to be fine. Like, I think Squirrel's good. I just don't think Squirrel has like A+ potential. I think he's just a solid B+, A-, which is fine. But I think the guy who has the most potential to pop is Dante. And I think that's still my prediction. If Nico's great, Dante's great.
I'd agree with you. No, I think potential-wise, I think Dante Thornton has a ton of upside. I mean, looking into last year, a lot of people thought he was going to pop off because, he's getting comparisons of a mixture of a Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt type guy, like the guy with the speed, but also the size. And if he can match that up, play to his potential, like we all remember that Missouri catch. Unfortunately, he got injured on the play, and that was the end of his season. But he was an incredible touchdown catch that he got from Joe in that game that, gave all fans hope early in that game on the road before it turned out being into the blowout that it was, that he could be somebody who could really produce. And I think he obviously has the potential. He's a freak athlete. Like, that's just undebatable how freak of an athlete that guy is. I think he could be, but as you said, he's got to take the jump. He's got to take the steps. And that's a question. It's kind of like, we think he can. Will he do it? The one proven commodity, as you kind of mentioned, has been Squirrel. And so is that going to be like a reliant point for the Vols offense, or what happens? I don't know. I think for me, it's a bigger question. I always get skeptical of preseason Heisman odds and stuff like that. I mean, Remember last year, like, people were like, Joe Milton could be a dark horse Heisman candidate. And it's, he could have been. He has obviously, once again, the potential, the athleticism, the size. It's why he gets taken in the NFL draft. I mean, the guy's also a freak athlete, but can freak athlete meet production on the field is always a big question.
Yeah.
It remains a question for the Vols, I think, going into this fall season.
I love it. That was fun. What'd you think?
I loved it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, what could the good folks check out from you and the team over at WBIR this week? Any special reports, any special things you want to point out here for the good folks who are tuning in this week?
Big feature. We did a couple interviews before the NCAA tournament for Vol baseball, did a great story on Chris Damos and, how he lost his dad as a junior in high school. And that kind of drove him to, wanting to really like go hard at D1 baseball and pursue his dreams of eventually becoming a pro. And, he's had a great year and he's had quite the journey. So check that story out. And, we did an interview with Cal Stark, and obviously after the weekend that he had, just very fortuitous that we just happened to interview him before the tournament. And so that story will be airing Thursday, and we'll post it on WBIR.com. And a lot of exciting coverage, honestly, with Vols wrapping up their baseball season, and more to come from our sports team with me, Frank DeLuca, and Emily Ray Cochran. Sports team's been killing it, and I'm really proud of the work that we've been putting in. And we're glad to just serve our community. That's, I think, what we're most proud of. So
I love it. Well, thank you so much for making the time, man, and we'll have to do this again soon.
Yeah, man, anytime.